First, a few acknowledgements. This series is programmed by Janine Marchessault and I, and administered by Tamara Toledo. It's presented by Prefix in association with the Visible City Project and Archive at York University. Prefix gratefully acknowledges the support of our official sponsors, A La Carte Kitchen and the Sutton Place Hotel, as well as the Toronto Arts Council, the Ontario Arts Council, and the Canada Council for the Arts. Tonight, I have the rare privilege of welcoming you to a lecture by the founding director and chair of the Board of Trustees of the Canadian Centre for Architecture, Phyllis Lambert. Madam Lambert's presentation will be about 30 minutes in length, after which there'll be an opportunity to engage her in Q&A. Following the Q&A, I encourage everyone to please stick around and join us for informal conversation. There'll be beer, wine, Perrier juice, and refreshments available at the bar at no charge. Now, this lecture represents the final event in the current season of the Urban Field Speaker Series. Plans are already underway for next year's series, which will include, among others, the Golden Lion winning artist and editor of the Urban Research Journal Des Rives, Andreas Fogarasi. Before we begin, please ensure that your cell phones are turned off. Now, I'd like to turn things over to our moderator for this evening, who will introduce our speaker. Luigi Ferreira is the director of the School of Design at George Brown College and the Institute Without Boundaries. Please welcome Luigi Ferreira.
Well, it's indeed a pleasure to introduce Madame Lambert this evening. I personally owe a great debt of gratitude when I was a young graduate from architectural school. Just a few years into my career, I was hosting an event and I turned to her. She didn't know me. I asked her, would she come to Toronto to support the event and be a speaker at the event? And she said yes. And I think one of her strongest characteristics is generosity. And I think we could speak of her this evening as an architect, an urbanist, a director of a museum, a patron, a benefactor, a committed social activist. There's so many ways we could describe her, but I'd like to focus on her lifelong championing of architectural literacy, of educating the public about the importance of architecture. And she's done this in her career in many, many ways, from using her influence to ensure that landmark projects, such as the Sea Grant project in New York or the Toronto Dominion Centre in Toronto, were designed at the highest level of architectural quality, from her own architectural career, where she made significant contributions to revitalizing cities, whether it's with the Sadie Bronfman Center in Montreal, whether it was when she, as a developer, restored the Biltmore in Los Angeles, or restored Ben Ezra Synagogue in Cairo, or when she, in probably her most inspired moment, brought all of these things together to repair and restore a piece of Montreal through the creation of a Center for Architectural Literacy, the Center for Canadian Architecture. This evening, I think she's going to speak to us about how, through its exhibits and its programs, it's been really transforming and educating the world. And without further ado, Madame Lambert.
Thank you, Luigi. Now, I'm not good like Luigi is on saying things off the cuff, and I'm going to read my talk more or less, and I'll be perfectly happy, of course, to off the cuff when we have discussions later. An optimistic view of the future of the world, I'm sorry, we'll try that again. An optimistic view of the future after World War II led to the possibility of great buildings, such as Mies van der Rohe's Seagram building in New York, of 1954-58, a heroic project in which I was deeply engaged. This immersion in architecture led me to inquire about the history of architectural ideas through architects' drawings and later photography of the built world. By the end of the 1950s, by the mid-50s, sorry, and into the mid-70s, it also became apparent that the planning of the brave new world had its very dark side in the destruction of built communities. While studying architecture and planning at IIT in Chicago, I began focusing on the effects of so-called urban renewal there and later in Montreal, where unchecked development was destructuring the historical, social, urban fabric of the city. I was determined that this must not go on. This determination led to my grave concern about public awareness and education, and in 1979, to founding the CCA. The booklet you see on the screen, first 5 years, Les Débuts, presented the purposes of the CCA and the growth of its collection and staff between 1979, when it was granted its latest patent, and 1984, when the CCA was accredited as a public museum. The growth was phenomenal in those years, from 6,000 volumes in the library to 50,000 volumes, that is in those, what was it, that's it, 79, 84, that's 5 years. From 6,000 to 32,000 photographs, from 2,000 to 12,000 sheets in prints and drawings, and the acquisition by then of 10 architectural archives. In 1989, we opened our new center, which in effect was built on the foundation of the collections. I think I have a little device here to point, but sorry. So here we have, this is ground line, and here you have the vaults of the CCA, and this is the two levels of vaults of the CCA. And then this is the level of the curatorial level, and then above is the piano nobile, and this is the library, this is, I guess, that is the study center, and this is these are the galleries, and this is the entry into the study center, and this is the library, this is the section, this is the bookstore. The exhibition and catalog highlighted the acquisition of the first 5 decades after we opened to the public. And it was dedicated, I lost myself in pointing all these things out. Piano nobile, with its exhibition galleries, bookstore, library, reading room, and in the 2 wings, the study center on one side and the theater on the other. Our 10th anniversary, published En Chantier, the CCA collections 1989 to 1999. The exhibition and catalog highlighted the acquisitions of the first decades after we opened to the public. It was dedicated to the hundreds of donors who have enriched the collection and helped to keep them perpetually under construction. Spanning 5 centuries of architectural history, En Chantier, the exhibition, and the catalogue, were intended to offer insight into architecture's extraordinary power as an agent of social change. It's fascinating now to survey the CCA 20 years after it was open to the public. Time alters experience, and together time and experience alter perception and practice. I would like to share with you my perception of the evolution of the CCA over the last 20 years, during which time it is clear that our mandate has remained steadfastly the same. The CCA is an international research center and museum founded on the conviction that architecture is a public concern. It is a new form of cultural institution that aims to build public awareness of the role of architecture in society, to promote scholarly research in the field, and stimulate innovation in design practice. And yet, there has been change. Since change is most sharply drawn by looking at the extremes, I would like to compare our early exhibitions with more recent ones to show that the changes which have occurred have not been changes of intent, but rather of emphasis. It should also be said that our exhibitions and the publications that accompany them present the major face of our programs. In our opening year, the exhibition, Architecture and Its Image, I'm showing you the two posters from it. Very funny at the time that Bill 101 came into Montreal. The outside of the building is in French, and the inside, the title is, I showed that to Premier Bourassa, he laughed. The exhibition presented an overview of our collection from the 15th century into the 20th century as a study of representation of architectural ideas in all media and the interrelationships between them. The exhibition, the Pantheon, Symbol of Revolution, was an investigative art and historical exhibition, bringing together widely dispersed materials. One of our posters, this one, portrayed Mitterrand, whose first gesture after his investiture was to carry roses to the tomb of great men in what was originally the expiatory chapel of Sainte-Geneviève. We wanted to call attention to the fact that the building is still an important symbol and still there. The exhibition was stunningly installed at the CCA, it also was shown in Paris, in a representation redolent of traditional museum practice. It also brought together a mixture of media, books, prints, drawings, sculpture, documents, and objects that communicated the very essence of architectural understanding, the integration of meaning and form. Begun in 1768, Sainte-Geneviève was the first great neoclassical building in France to project the rationality and lightness of the Siècle des Lumières. During the French Revolution, it was secularized, transformed from a place of worship, Sainte-Geneviève, into the Pantheon, a shrine honoring the great men of France. This transformation necessitated architectural modifications to induce a somber atmosphere as well as reprogramming of the symbols embedded in the pediments and paintings and works of art. Here we see Soufflot's elevation on the left, and there is, you can't see it very well, but there's sort of a cross in the center of the pediment. And on the right is the Baldur's photograph of the building as it was built. And the inscription is Aux grands hommes, la patrie reconnaissante. To the great arms, the patrie, the country, is reconnaissant. At the time of the Restoration, however, there was, the Restoration would legitimize the return to the monarchy and propose the building's return to religion. And so you see this drawing by Baltard, who did, of course, those great markets in central Paris, which were torn down, unfortunately. But here you see, again, this didn't happen, because the building of Baltard is still, that you saw in the photograph, by Baltard, is still there. Like the Pantheon, most of our early shows were art historical in nature, and were also presented in major museums abroad. With photography and architecture, we had opened up a new field of study, in effect, architectural photography. It was shown in 1979, before the CCA building opened, at the Centre Pompidou in Paris, the Cooper Hewitt in New York, the Art Institute of Chicago, and the National Gallery in Ottawa. Another exhibition, Edouard Muybridge and the photographic panorama of San Francisco, 1850 to 1880, traveled to Paris and San Francisco. The Palladian Revival, Lord Burlington, his villa and garden at Chiswick, was also presented at the Royal Society in London. The photographs of Edouard Muybridge's Landscapes and Monuments of France was co-produced with the Metropolitan Museum in New York. Looking back, one sees that there was a consistent strategy over the first 5 years after the CCA had opened. And although it was unstated, we clearly strove to establish the strength of CCA's collections and to frame architectural documents with the same seriousness as works of art. We were very much noticed in Europe. Over the next 10 years or so, the exhibitions were organized, on most of them, that was most of them, for we took very few loans. and continuously brought forward new research and new subjects. And while there was less focus on the collection as such, they were perhaps more critically, but still historically, oriented. There were exhibitions on cities, 3 on Montreal, on landscape. We established photographic commissions that became part of our collection, notably viewing Olmsted, involving Leif Friedlander, and two Toronto people who are absolutely here tonight, Jeffrey James and Robert Burley, all of whom interpreted Olmsted's parks across North America over a period of 6 years and through 4 seasons. We also presented particular aspects of the work of heroic architects, Wright, Mies, Tholomyès, and contemporary architects, Charney and Eisenman. Institutions in Europe were beginning to present exhibitions à la Canadaise, that is, idea-driven, with a combination of object types. Numerous archives were added, among them KPMB, Arthur Erickson, Van Ginkel, Shim & Sutcliffe, those are all Toronto firms, as you know. Our success was impressive, but rather than continuing along the same road, we were conscious that our mission was to make architecture a public concern and to initiate change. The powerful series of exhibitions on the American century initiated coherent programming at the CCA over a number of years. In the 1990s, fewer exhibitions traveled, as fewer were traditionally art historical, and in general, they were less object-oriented than idea-driven and critical. Even such an extraordinary exhibition as the American Lawn, Surface of Everyday Life, was presented at only one other venue, the brilliant installation by Diller and Scafiglio, the architects, placed this ubiquitous surface in an uncertain borderland between public and private space, landscape and building, dream and nightmare. We began to move continuously in the direction of critical issues in 2003 and 2004, with the exhibition Out of the Box, exhibiting materials from the recently required archives of major architects during the 1960s, 70s, and 80s. Cedric Clarke, Aldo Rossi, James Sterling, Gordon Mallow Clark, you see them on the facade of the CCA from left to right. The film that you're going to see has some, should I push down?
Yep.
Okay. Okay. Thank you. Because we have a little film, part of the excerpts from the Terry Vendamich's, the Citizen Lambert show. Leaving, here this documents the archives leaving the office of Cedric Price in London and installed at the CCA. The Centre Pompidou could not have been designed without Price's Fun Palace, in which everything we have would have, which everything would have been movable, as you see. Well, you can't see it being moved, but it was. Mallow Clark, in an effort to unveil an undiscovered potential of forms as social documents, went further, questioning the concepts of architecture and space. And this is at the entrance to the I guess you say employees, I hate that word, but all members of the CCA who come in and anybody else who's not just going to exhibitions. And that's always there on that wall. The purpose of this first look at these architects' archives, which are comprehensive records of practice, that's what I'm describing archives, were to emphasize the cross-connection between materials collected in depth and breadth in order to establish the vital interconnections that fuel discourse on architecture and the city. With Out of the Box, we created for the first time a CCA online exhibition site. You can still go to that, I'm not showing it at all. Providing extended access to the archives through installation photographs, selected projects and works, wall text, and statements by guest curators. With the book, Sense of the City, with the Sense of the City, the exhibition and book, in 2005-2006, the CCA solidly engaged urgent urban issues by presenting new ways of looking at the city. The introductory rooms focused on great variety of sense perceptions of urban creatures like rats, flies, dogs, and other animals, and insects. We looked at urban phenomena and perceptions that have traditionally been ignored and challenged the dominance of visual in the urban environment. There were 5 interrelated sections: surface of the city. Here you see, you can't read it, I mean, we take forever. And then also, this is Macadam, you know, not Macadam, anyways, that road service we all used, or car service, I can't think of the name of it. Because that's a service, that's another service of everyday life. And then there was also the seasonal city, and sound of the city, and the nocturnal city and the air of the city, which all proposed a rethinking of its latent qualities, suggesting the rich array of urban experiences and behavior lying just beyond traditional interpretations. In other galleries of the CCA, related exhibitions like Hear, Smell and Touch, The City, and Green Energy, Many Farms, which was installed by architects involved in the pioneering of the recycling of an area in Montreal. And from our collection was drawn the small but powerful exhibition, Cornelia Hahn Oberlander, Ecological Landscapes, a pioneering vision of a socially conscious and environmentally sustainable landscape design by one of the world's leading landscape architects who lives and works in Vancouver. She's just at a park here that I will show today. We try to relate all our programs, lectures, films, educational and family programs, and to some extent our research programs, to themes, or I should say, the problematics of the major exhibitions, each of which, in turn, is related to the others, in the sense that we have been approaching contemporary issues in perspective from the various points of view and taking positions. In 2006, we mounted Environment, Approaches to Tomorrow, focusing on the work of French horticultural engineer and landscape architect Gilles Clément and Swiss architect Philippe Ram. This exhibition proposed a shift in perspective that takes the environment itself, that takes the environment itself rather than human demands on the environment as a starting point for reflection. A central element of Gilles Clément's installation was a large lustre or chandelier, comprising a collection of detritus and self-seeded plants he gathered on an unused site just behind the CCA garden. Here you see, mostly you see just bits and pieces of these new plants, but there were cell phones and all sorts of other things. With surprising diversity of plants growing on the site, as well as the range of human garbage, it is symbolic of Clément's theory of the third landscape, his manifesto on the potential of leftover space to engender biodiversity. Ram, operating within a very different concept, explored the notion that form and function follow climate. In one gallery, temperature, humidity, light and light conditions were measured by sensors placed at regular intervals. This data was interpreted through, is that finished? Through images and a narration in the adjacent black room, and then in the adjacent black room gallery. And that little images on the left, you see those little lights. That was not the whole electronics of the thing. And it was proposing uses of the room based on solely on environmental readings. This exhibition exemplified our practice of presenting contemporary architectural practices, not individually, but in parallel, to feature differing approaches to relate problems, a dialectic means of grappling with issues of the present and the future. In 2007, our exhibition, I'm not giving you all of them, I'm just, so, our exhibition of publication, 1973, Sorry Out of Gas, became the first study on the architectural innovation spurred by the 1973 oil crisis, which let loose the same economic, political, and social upheaval across the world that we now experience 35 years later. However, the scale and effects are much worse today, as you know. Our book opened with an illustrated tale for children by British graphic artist Harriet Russell, introducing the concepts of sun, wind, and their integration within the house. Soaring out of gas aimed at increasing public awareness and encouraging contemporary research in the field, retrieving and representing some of the experiments that a number of people who thought differently produced over 3 decades. Initiatives of the 1970s and earlier that were hastily and thoughtlessly cast aside. Here you can see the graphics on the wall on the room where it's discussing solar collectors. And then in this image, you see this was concerned with earth sheltering, again a wall diagram, and which dramatically reduced heating bills. We had a case with somebody who very carefully kept all his heating bills. And this is, you see, a family outside a concrete shelter. As we all know, these technologies are now being seriously pursued. Actions, what you can do with the city. Our recent and widely popular exhibition presented 99 actions that instigate positive change in contemporary cities around the world. Seemingly common activities such as walking, playing, recycling, and gardening are pushed beyond their usual definitions by international architects, artists, and collectors. Here you see one of the galleries. Their experimental interactions with the urban environment show the potential influence personal involvement can have in shaping the city, and challenge fellow residents to participate. You can experience all these actions and present your own to us on our interactive website. And here you see the first, the opening thing of it, the tools for action. And the text column to the right, I guess it's is composed of responses that were sent to us. We asked people to send in responses, and what they proposed, what people were proposed as other kinds of actions. But I'm not going to show you those, but I can show you ours. Toronto's, is that Toronto's Urban Repair? I don't think it is. Well, maybe it is. Anyway, I'll tell you, Toronto's Urban Repair Squad, tired of waiting for municipal authorities to create adequate bicycle lanes, and began to install their own, do-it-your-own infrastructure, encourage others to take actions. Action number 38, the ArchiSuit project is based on 4 jogging suits, clothing designed to circumvent barriers created by the city to prevent lying on benches. In Los Angeles, this one. Ping pong connects neighbors, subverting a fence in Amsterdam that is a dividing element, transforming the fence into a meeting place. And 83, the Department of Parks of Turin installed sheep and lambs to act as land mowers. The interaction of students with our exhibitions was initiated with Out of the Box when the sections of that exhibition on Price and Margaret Clark were further researched by students at Columbia University, where the results of their work, basically interviews, were exhibited together with our archival material. And in 2007, Princeton students, working with Professor Beatriz Colomina of Princeton, created the traveling exhibition Clip, Stamp, Fold to explore the little architectural magazines of the 1960s and 70s that had instigated a radical transformation in architectural culture. Total Environment Montreal, 1965-1975, and here you see the Ethel School, is the result of a research seminar led by Alessandro Ponti at the University of Montreal. With roots in the late 19th century, interest in Gesamtkunstwerk, or total artwork, and the Bauhaus, Montreal-based architects and based artists, architects, and intellectuals enthusiastically adopted the new technologies and materials of the era of space conquest, computerization, and mass communication. They envisioned the dawn of a second industrial revolution that promised to liberate mankind through the use of information technology, creating a total environment of ephemeral architecture. While that vision was shared by cutting-edge thinkers all around the world, this very specific Montreal version has largely been forgotten. The work of marshalling material, held both privately and in various Montreal institutions, brings to light Edmund Allen's original atlascope, Maurice Demer's Space Age Environments, Futurabilia, Le Drag, the famous restaurant Valerie Disco, designed by François Delecret, Les Mondes Parallèles, Inflatable Cybernetic Environments by Gilles Boisvert, and the mythical Discothèque, realized by Jean-Paul Mousseau, among many other artists. And the hall cases, and in the hall cases were models of inhabitable sculpture by Robert Roussel, and in these cases, on all the walls, magazines, video clips, and album covers and posters. CCA research programs are related to the overall concerns of the place. The Study Center, I don't think I have any more slides. Well, I'll just leave that on, but it'll be pleasant. Research program relates to the overall concerns of the place. The Study Center, established in 1997, is an international institute for advanced research into all aspects of architectural thought. Either our collection or current issues and debates fire our mandate, and vice versa. They constitute the foundation of our multifaceted programs of research conducted by visiting scholars in residence. Above all, the CCA believes that scholarly research has a profound cultural implication, and that scholars themselves bear social responsibility. Visiting scholars are encouraged to treat architecture in all its dimensions as a public concern. The Study Center's initial activity was the postdoctoral visiting scholars program, involving some 10 scholars and professionals selected by every year by a jury from applicants at very different stages of their careers. The Study Center's alumni keep in touch even though they span the globe by now. Based on the CCA's strong collection, this program provides a stimulating environment of intellectual exchange, which has been substantially expanded and enriched in the last years to include graduate students. One of those graduate students is seen in this room, I'm glad to say. The annual Power Corp of Canada Award granted by the CCA attracts students across Canada at the master's level who work collaboratively on such programs as urban agriculture in Canada and cold and its environments. The Toronto Dominion Financial Bank Group CCA Collection Research Grants are developed in partnership with doctoral programs in the history of art and architecture in Canadian universities. With the generous support of the Andrew W. Mellon Foundation, distinguished senior scholars of international reputation are appointed Mellon Senior Fellows each year. And there are also the graduate students from various universities. We've never had anybody from Toronto. From Montreal we have, from Harvard, from MIT, from Princeton, and now from the ETH in Switzerland. And they're sort of growing. The Weekly Study Center, these are people who come with partly supported by the grants of the institutions that they are, and then of course supported by us with all the materials they use in their offices. The study seminars attended by 30 to 40 scholars in residence over 5 months, and an equal number of interested members of the public form an extremely lively forum on a wide variety of subjects and issues. I love this forum, it's so terrific. Now, 30 years on, as we celebrate the 20 years since the CCA opened as a public museum and research center, around 3.5 billion people live in cities around the world, as compared with around 1.5 billion in 1977. I'm implicating that the world has changed, okay? The challenges that face us now are not only the threat of rampant and unethical urban renewal and development, which we all experience, but problems at a global scale that deeply affect cities everywhere, including Montreal and Toronto. Climate change, pollution, energy, terrorism, pandemic, decaying urban infrastructure, shortages, oil, water, and potentially food, poverty, diminishing quality of life, and still, in many places, a lack of public awareness and apathy. In this context, the CCA continues to question assumptions, to push the limits of contemporary thinking, about the built domain and to spur critical reflection on its initiatives, in its research initiatives, sorry. Exhibitions, publications, children's programs, and collaboration with other places. As we celebrate the first 2 decades since the building opened, we had 4,500 people the other night for 20 hours during the day. It was terrific. We are about to launch a new CCA website, the Information Architecture of the CCA, with which we will welcome, unchallenged, an ever larger public. Thank you. I guess we can turn that off.
I'd like to open the floor to questions of Madame Lambert.
I'm fine, I'm here, I'm just putting my papers in it, but I will have to organize it that way.
Please.
Phyllis,
Joy.
did you say that you had 4,000 people?
Yeah, 4,500.
In,
But you don't
In a
know, over
week?
20 hours.
over 20 hours?
Yes.
That's a lot of people.
It was great. We advertised, you know, the radio kept on saying every hour, CCA is open today, it's 20th anniversary. And all these people came, it was fantastic. Our exhibition, our new exhibition, isn't installed yet. So they used all the galleries. There's a central gallery that, you know, the small galleries, just loaded with kids. I mean, it was just fantastic. And outside we had tables and benches, and people had hot dogs, and they had ice cream, and there were bands outside, there were quartets and groups inside, all sorts of projections. I mean, it was terrific. That's okay. The Bibliothèque Nationale in Montreal gets 10,000 people a day. So this is just mere piker stuff.
Other questions? I have a question. You're always at the forefront of ideas with your exhibitions. How do you determine that? Is that a group work that comes together, or is it you know, the curatorial leadership? How is that done at the?
Well, and some of our exhibitions, for example, the exhibition on Olmsted, it was Jeffrey James who suggested it to us. And then we made up a group of photographers. Actually, it was generational because Lee Friedlander, of course, is the great overstatement of such things. He was just marvelous photographer. And Jeffrey was, you know, another generation. And then Bob Burley was another generation. And Bob was the only one who photographed in color. But they all put together, they used to visit each other in part. It was great. And those who were using widescreen, you know, wide angle cameras started using, you know, the format of the view camera. And then they were always changing. It was a great project. And I guess the American Lawn, which was a good title, it was just a great show. And that was thought up by George Tissot, who was at Princeton then, and so says Lewis, the teaching there. She's, you know, the people have just done the Lewis video, just opening the first part of the restructuring of the Lincoln Center and the new Southern Hall, just wonderful. And I guess most recently, I guess, you know, sometimes it's the director who thinks of them. And, you know, the Mies exhibition, we decided to do it because Mies was 100th anniversary or something. We don't like to do anniversaries too often because you get stuck with that. But then you do it a couple of years later after the anniversary or something. But that was, of course, so tremendous. And so we did the Mies in America, and the Museum of Modern Art did Mies in Berlin. So that was very special. And this last group of exhibitions I've been showing you has really been Mirko Zardini, who is our director. And the exhibition actions, he spoke to Giovanna Borassi, who is our curator of contemporary he said, you know, you're younger than I am. You figure out with all the guys who work at CCA what to, you know, what are these actions? What are people doing? So whatever way they did it, they did it. And it was, you know, a collaborative effort of people. And of course, our first exhibitions, we planned them very much. Architecture and its image was, Yves Blau was our curator then, and the Pantheon, one of our curators had discovered objects that sort of went together, the boundless things, and of course we had the very much earlier drawings by Soufflot, and so she said, oh, this is, and then we had some other documents really, because they, you know, it was complicated. The church had this classical structure, but a Gothic structure also in the top of it. And we had a marvelous series of papers that the engineers had worked on about what to do about, because those columns weren't quite so stable. And they were dull and things like that. There were problems, structural problems. And so we had that fantastic thing. And Barry Bergdahl, who's now the director of, he's the head of the Department of Architecture at MoMA now. He's an historian, and he was just doing his doctorate thesis in Paris, and he was there. And so we talked, and I asked him if he would do the show, you know, because there were just all these fantastic things that they found up in the combe and things. So it's a kind of a variety of
ways that they came
yes,
together.
yes.
And you described exhibits alla Canadese, so it's an Italo Canadese. I'd love to know how you saw it. Was this like a European reaction? What was an exhibit alla Canadese?
Well, you know, one of the things when we started the CCA, for example, the RIBA, which was kind of the lodestone of such places, when we, you know, before 1979, or well, it took a while for us to get on the map, but anyway, they had a gallery design of the drawings collection, and it was a whole lot of cases around the room. It was very elegant things like that. And they kind of pinned up the drawings to on a, you know, those boards with bowls or something in it. And I just didn't think that was the way to approach a drawing, because you didn't say anything about the drawing, because people just said, oh, architecture, you know. And they say, well, how do you show architecture in a museum? You don't show architecture, but you show the ideas and the process of it, and how that evolves. And of course, what's so wonderful is having this material from different periods and and then the archives that all play against each other. So that's what's really exciting.
So that was the really the Canadian take that people started to notice from across.
Yeah, well, what they noticed was that we presented, we didn't say sort of, we never did these awful we did an exhibition on Peter Eisman, but it wasn't a monographic exhibition as such. As one problematic. And so same thing with Melvin Charney. And Cormier, of course, we wanted people to know and understand his work, so we did Cormier at the University of Montreal. It was not a monographic exhibition on, you know, they did this, and then the wind blew, and then they did that, you know, that sort of thing. Actually, very interesting. We're doing a Sterling exhibition now, Jim Sterling exhibition with Yale, and somebody at Yale, you know, the director of the British Art, it was both the Department of Architecture and the British Art, and they sort of thought they would do a nice monographic of Jim Sterling, but we were down we were going to do that. We certainly weren't. And so it took a while to find somebody who would be a marvelous curator for it. Joni Vinter is doing it. And that's opening in 10, I think, 10. And be the CCA 211. And what happened was that if you don't know architecture, because this woman who's the director doesn't know architecture, you know. And so you think of what you do with painter, where you show the various stages of their life. And that's because she didn't understand what an archive was. And when you start going into the archive, and you find all this incredible material of how architecture goes from one project to the other, and the notes that might be written by him or other people in the office, this is what really gets exciting.
wondering, can a museum have an impact on the urban planning of the city? Have you, like, the museum had a tremendous impact in repairing that part of the city, but have the exhibitions actually started to influence public policy?
Well, I think that, the fact that there's an exhibition every 3 months or 6 months or whatever it is. Well, there are always, every 3 months or so, something, a new exhibition once on the galleries. And the fact that there are talks, it's always in the paper, it's always in the press, and it's always, and so, when we speak out, people pay attention. And of course, in Montreal, we have Heritage Montreal, and the major person there is Dina Bumbaroo, and he is just absolutely extraordinary. He was, for two sessions, the executive director, no, he was the secretary, which is like the executive director, of Ecomos in Paris. And, so that means that he's a person who's highly recognized in the field. And then we have, some architects who are just splendid. For example, Renée Daoust, incredible. She's the one who did the Quartier International de Montréal, sort of, it goes on like about a quarter of a mile, and it used one new square, a new interior square, and another square that had not been used. All was brought together, and very, very splendid. And she had been trained by Melvin Charney. So that there's a kind of, we're not dealing in a place where there's, well, I guess when we started Heritage Montreal, nobody cared about anything. The great stone buildings, everybody said, oh, that's old Depression stuff, let's get rid of it, So I think that, that was, of course, me acting with other people in conservation in Montreal. But I think that, you have to sort of say that.
It accumulates.
Yeah, right. And we've had exhibitions where I didn't show. We've had exhibitions for a couple of years. We had exhibitions in our, in the Champs-Élysées House, which is that little house I didn't point out. What was on the site when we got it, and we had exhibitions of local architects. So, and they put up their own exhibition. We don't do that now because you can't keep on doing that forever. And we integrate different things. We also used to have exhibitions where we had a wonderful collection of toys and things like that, but that I showed you that it's that all of our exhibitions have something for children in them, and that one, of course, is that wonderful series of images about wind and, it's a really great little thing, a series of things for kids, So we treat kids, we have all sorts of programs for children.
You mentioned earlier the collaboration that leads to the exhibitions, and before this evening, we had a chance to speak, and you were mentioning the collaboration that you're working on currently in the district. Can you tell us a bit about how you're working with the community to reshape?
We have, Montreal has, there's a lot of horrible stuff going on with Save Montreal. We actually initiated in Montreal basically public consultation. And so that happened with the McGill College street where, one of the development companies, wanted to cover over a street, and the city thought, well, that's a great idea. We fought that the Chamber of Commerce and sorts of things. Then Milton Park, of course, the people of the area that didn't want their neighborhood knocked down. And so there again, we worked with that. And then the public hearings in the port, where this would be messed up for a long time, and they had these great ideas of putting a high-rise elevator, or a train, because there's train tracks on the ground, so that you could go underneath. I mean, really mad things. Or else having American City, the Russ Corporation, come and do a big, outside dropping in this kind of thing. And so we Heritage Montreal, I, all sorts of people, fought this for a long time. And then there was a new minister during Joe Booth's thing. And so couple of us from Heritage Montreal went up to Ottawa to see the head of CMHC. No, that's a different thing, I'm sorry, that was enough part. We went up to see the new minister. And he was a minister who was a bagman, and bagmen don't have really great reputations. And so we sort of said, you want to be a hero. And the only way to do it is to have public hearings. And so he put that into place. So, and so that was just tremendous. And then we had a new mayor in Montreal who was Rourke. And he got rid of public consultations. So then we realized that you had to get them into the city's charter. So that, anyway, they are in the city's charter now. And we have the Conseil du Patrimoine de Montréal, so that it has no actual powers, but it certainly has a lot of ability to pronounce on projects that are to come. When people, and also go into the various neighborhoods and talk to people. So that's very effective, really. And then, when the Quartier International de Montréal was done, I mean, what's it called, the Quartier des Beaux et des Placements, the guy who was head of that, he didn't say, oh, sure, we'll do that, He said, this sounds terrific. They have the biggest land in Napoleon, and he said, if everybody really agrees to this, we'll do it. So there were all sorts of, and then in Montreal, there's a table de consultation, where all the people gather around and discuss what's happening in new projects. And St. Catherine Street, near just where the CCA is, from Guy Street, let's say a little beyond Guy Street to Atwater Street, is a disaster. Just a disaster, and all sorts of things were happening. The hospital in that area was going to be moved because they're doing super hospital, and so that would be empty. And then the Faubourg, which was very good when it was first done, and big part of the Dunn's property, was just going to rack and ruin. And there was a site there that was, all boarded up for 10 years, and it was just awful. And then there was also a developer who wanted to do something across the street. Anyway, we got together with all of the major stakeholders in the area, which meant the developers, the institutions, the store owners, the students, the residents in high-rise apartments, the residents who have these lovely graystone buildings, and the stores like, the awful thing, Pepsi Forum, and then it's just such a bad place. And it was the old forum that turned into nothing. And we all got together, and we worked from 2:05 on. We hired a group to sort of analyze what was needed in the area. And so, week after week, every 2 weeks, we'd meet, and everybody around the table would say what the problems were and what the good things were. And so we'd map these, and we keep on going. And finally, we took this to the city, and we said, we need to do a projet particulier d'urbanisme, means planning in an area the city would put money into effectively. And so that they then gave us a planner, and he came up with this place called the Square. Anyway, we took it, and made a terrible plan for all of that. So we didn't think much of it. So we all raised the money ourselves to have a concours, a charrette, in which we got 3 architectural groups to discuss, what the possibilities are. Now they have a very good planner of the arrondissement who's working on that. So, the developers come to us with their projects now, and we say, well, maybe you could fix this, or maybe this would work. And they really come to us, and we all work together, and it's fabulous. It's the only way to develop the city.
It's the way the city should be built.
Yeah.
Other questions from your son, please?
What was the American lawn all about?
Well, it was the fact that service of everyday life, and it was the fact that, you see nothing but lawns, these lawn mowers, those ads about, on the radio, Johnny, you got a lawn, mow the lawn tonight? Nah, I don't want to do it, and it's just a kind of ubiquitous thing that they put things in the laws when dogs go on, have diseases, and then there are all different kinds of lawns. There are lawns that are made into the desert so that you can have golf courses in the desert, very ecologically well organized. There are, that first room I showed you, that was an economic pattern of, small houses and large mansions, and the lawn that was in relation to that. There were exhibitions of, going down streets, or the spaces between houses and the lawns. There were, and of course, the Blue Velvet, the lawnmower goes a little bit crazy in that film. There were the Lady Club of America. I mean, just all the various aspects of the lawn and how, the cultural aspects of the lawn, and it makes people aware of what's happening. And, we're trying to, at the CCA we have lawns too, and we're trying to work out a way of not having all of our lawns. And of course, one place that a lot of people have to sit on the lawns. But it was a kind of critique of the fact, it comes from the British, of course, who had all these great estates. And it was a critique of the fact that the lawn was a kind of socio-ubiquitous. One ought to think about that. There are neighborhoods that have laws that you have to have, so much lawn in front of you, or that a person that has a lawn that lets everything grow wild, and they say, oh, no, you can't do it. I mean, all this stuff. Control.
If you may think that you may stop for a second to think about the city barriers, bureaucratic barriers, what will be your dream for today, for tomorrow?
Could you? I can't hear you, so could you?
Just said if we were to stop for a moment and think about barriers and city bureaucracy barriers, what would be the thing that you would change? What would be your dream for tomorrow?
But what do you mean by barriers? I mean, I know there are barriers. I mean, do you mean barriers like train tracks?
No, not physical, rather, people-centered, like
Regulatory.
Regulatory, like policy, kind of like barriers.
Well, you have to have regulatory things. I mean, for example, you have a small city, you don't need traffic lights. But when you have a large city, you need traffic lights. So that there are, in Montreal, for example, one problem that we face, I mean, everybody said has their own problems, but one problem we face is that that certain of the districts don't have very good planners, or they don't have any sophisticated people. They can do their own public hearings and things like that. And so they say, oh, they're against any change. They're against people doing things, and it's very hard to have that sort of thing. So in a way, it's very good having these neighborhoods because it's very sort of democratically drawn, and at the same time, like all things, it has its strengths and its black parts. And for example, you know this perfectly well, in the 60s and the 50s, all the emphasis in the city was placed on traffic in towns, moving through towns. That'll come up in our next exhibition. It's called Speed Limits. But also, now, of course, we have a very different attitude. And so it's zoning and things like that. There used to be an idea that you zone everything the same. Or no, you don't zone everything the same, but you have one shop that's zoning everything. And now it's much more, you do it by neighborhood and you do it by consultation with people. I think that the public consultation is absolutely essential to cities. And I think that's the most important of all the regulations that must be there. And in the charter of the city, so that one mayor can say, oh, I don't like that, and go on. I finally got to that. Thank you for your question.
Any other questions? Yes.
Does Quebec have the equivalent of the Ontario Municipal Board?
Does Quebec have the equivalent of the Ontario Municipal Board?
What is the municipal board?
In Ontario, a city can reject a a development application. And because the cities are dependencies of the province, there is a municipal board, which is not elected but appointed, which hears in a legal manner development applications. So if the city rejects an application, the developer can take it to the municipal board and vice versa. The municipal board will have a hearing and adjudicate. So something that the city could have disallowed could all of a sudden be approved at the provincial level.
Well, that's a good thing. No, I guess what we worry about mostly is our, the older buildings we have in the neighborhoods. And so we have a heritage ruling, patrimoine. We have in the city, the city can say that this building can't be touched, or and areas can be just adjudicated, and then some of that can go to the province too, to the Commission des Biens Culturels. But people make a lot of noise, and I think that's our best municipal board. But that sounds like a good idea. I know they tried doing something like that once. Well, I guess in public hearings. The public hearings, I think, would act more like that. Because what happens in public hearing is that, well, it's by...
It's just more like a jury in a way. They're drawn from the general public.
They're drawn from people who have some understanding and who are, who one respects. And then everybody, you either prepare a paper, there's a whole process that you have to, this questioning period where you question the developer and he has to present his case, and then the people stand up and then they come back with their papers or their questions. And so I get quite busy when you do this.
Other questions?
Do you have good architectural critics on your Montreal newspapers?
No. No, we never have. And for a while, we had good people who were writing, just ad hoc sort of. I think actually Devoir had somebody who really did write, not such an odd every couple of weeks or every week. And then, just as everything was happening in Montreal, all sorts of things were changing. These big hospitals were happening, all sorts of things. They all disappeared. Just all disappeared. So, I guess we deal with it otherwise.
Do you remember many years ago Eric McLean?
His house?
He made many comments and he was just thrown to the wind.
Takes time. But now, there are, kind of organizations that are well respected and you can go to. I mean, people are always going to Heritage Montreal, or they can contact us. Ad hoc groups form all over the place for various problems.
There's a commentator, a writer here, John Bentley Mays.
Oh, yes.
He comes from Montreal.
I don't know if he comes from Montreal, but he's here. Well, sure, he's very good. I invited him tonight to come.
Yes.
What would you look for in good architectural criticism that would be relayed directly to the general public?
What would you look for?
In architectural criticism that could be relayed to the general public. So what characteristics make up for good architectural criticism?
I guess what Heritage Montreal does is very, very good. They give the background of the project, the site, they discuss the site, they discuss the history of the site, they discuss the effect of making it denser or not dense, and I think what it really should deal with is the city, because architectural criticism, I mean, we do have in these public hearings, sometimes you do actually discuss buildings, although usually it's discussing a project before it really gets to the built stage, which is a much better way of doing it. But when they do buildings, people discuss, I like red, I like blue, and all that sort of stuff. But the only way that you can really do something very much is to understand it within the overall planning of the city, and how it affects the buildings around them, or I think that those are the terms. I mean, you know, people in your paper, there's in the New York Times has always had a critic for years and years and years, and you know, that it helps people to understand. But interesting, I think now that the web and the internet is so strong, I think that's going to change. You know, and, there's you know, there's instant sort of the people who are texting and these other instant information that goes out too. But I think, you know, in that case, you need some people. I mean, I guess the CCA acts as a critic, and just in the way it's not addressed. You know, it presents ideas about the city, and then. I don't think it's such a bad idea that we don't have critics in a way, because I think that the public groups work better as critics, because they look at all of these things, and it's not just one person's opinion, and I think that's good.
John Martins.
Hi, John Martins. I just had a question of mortality. Where do you see the CCA in the next 50 years?
Where do I see the CCA?
Mortality. There's a question of mortality, because I want to know where you see the CCA in 50 years' time.
In 50 years from now?
Yeah.
Well, I hope it just is very, very strong in terms of doing what it does, and doing what I said, you know, as I summed up my paper, that I hope it's bringing up the issues, forming architects, because I know many young architects just come up and say, no, it's wonderful. Say, you know, CCA was so important for us because of the exhibitions, because of the research they can do there. And I see it as a kind of a place where it's a place of debate on the city, in essence.
On that note, are there any other questions, or Scott invite you back out to?
Yes, well. In recent years, many contemporary artists have been using architecture in their work, particularly its forms, scale drawings, models, and the like. And I'm wondering if you have any particular thoughts or feelings about that.
What is it?
A lot of artists
Yeah, I
are
know
using
that.
architecture in their
But
work.
I'd like it to last for.
What's your opinion of that? Do you have any thoughts? on
Wonderful.
that?
Yeah. I think that's very interesting. But there are also architects who are like sculptors, like Frank Gehry, you know. And though I love the building that he did here, I think that's just absolutely superb. I just think that very modest front, and that great room, and that stair that, you know, is in the, what was that name of that room, you know, that goes up. I think it made it very powerful. Turned a sort of provincial museum into a world-class museum, I think.
Any further questions? On that note, I just want to, on behalf of the